A Season of Waiting by Weston Ford. The rain pattered against the windows of Thornfield Manor as Miss Catherine Everett gazed out at the dreary English countryside. Spring had arrived, but its warmth had yet to penetrate the stone walls of her uncle's estate. 3 years had passed since she had come to live with her mother's brother following her parents' untimely death. And though grateful for his charity, Catherine could not help but feel that her life had been suspended in an endless winter. "You will catch a chill standing so close to the glass," came the sharp voice of her aunt, Mrs. Dorothea Thornfield, a woman whose pinched features matched her disposition. "Forgive me, Aunt," Catherine murmured, stepping back from the window. "I was merely admiring how the rain brings out the green of the hills." "Admiring the scenery will not secure your future," her aunt replied, settling into her favorite chair with her embroidery. "Your uncle and I have tolerated your presence these past years, but at 21 you should be concerned with making a suitable match. Your prospects diminish with each passing season." Catherine bit her tongue, having grown accustomed to her aunt's barbed reminders of her dependent status. The modest inheritance her parents had left was carefully managed by her uncle, doled out in meager allowances that barely covered the cost of keeping her wardrobe presentable. "I have given the matter considerable thought," Catherine said carefully. "Perhaps I might be permitted to inquire about a position as a governess." Her aunt's needle froze mid-stitch. "A governess? You would bring such shame upon this family? Your uncle would never permit it." "But I am well educated and—" "Enough," Mrs. Thornfield interrupted. "We have received an invitation to attend the summer assembly at Northbrook Hall next week. Lord and Lady Pembroke will be in attendance with their son, Mr. James Pembroke. He is in possession of a considerable fortune and is seeking a bride. Your uncle has already spoken to Lord Pembroke about an introduction." Catherine's chest tightened. James Pembroke's reputation as a cold, calculating man preceded him. At 35, he had amassed a fortune in shipping and was known to be seeking a young, biddable wife to manage his household and provide him with heirs. The thought of being bound to such a man made Catherine's stomach turn. "I shall prepare my best gown," she said quietly, knowing resistance was futile. "See that you do," her aunt replied, "and practice your piano playing. I hear Mr. Pembroke is particularly fond of music." The Pembroke carriage rattled along the country road, its occupants jostled by the uneven terrain. James Pembroke stared out the window, his expression inscrutable as the English countryside rolled past. At 35, he had built an empire through shrewd business decisions and unwavering determination. Now, with his financial future secure, he found himself pressured by his parents to establish a family line. "The Thornfields will be at the assembly," his mother reminded him from across the carriage. "Their niece is said to be a lovely girl with excellent manners." James suppressed a sigh. "Mother, I have told you I have no interest in being paraded before every eligible young woman in the county." "You cannot remain a bachelor forever," his father interjected gruffly. "A man in your position needs a wife to manage his household and provide heirs." James turned his gaze back to the window, knowing his parents' concerns were not entirely unfounded. His London home, though impeccably maintained by his staff, lacked warmth. And though he would never admit it aloud, the solitude of his success had begun to weigh on him. "I shall consider any introduction you deem appropriate," he conceded, "but I make no promises." His mother smiled triumphantly. "That is all I ask. Though I must say, from what I've heard of Miss Everett, she may surprise you. Lady Harrington tells me she is not only beautiful but possesses a lively intellect." James raised an eyebrow. "And what good is a lively intellect in a wife? I need someone who understands her duties and performs them without complaint." "Perhaps," his father said with unexpected insight, "what you need and what you think you need are not the same thing." The assembly room at Northbrook Hall glowed with the light of 100 candles, illuminating the elegant gathering of county society. Catherine stood beside her aunt and uncle, her pale blue gown, refashioned from last season, making her feel conspicuous among the ladies in their new finery. "There is Lord Pembroke," her uncle whispered, "and that must be his son beside him." Catherine followed his gaze to a tall figure standing near the entrance. James Pembroke cut an imposing figure, his dark hair swept back from a forehead that spoke of intelligence, his jaw set in what appeared to be perpetual determination. Unlike the other gentlemen who smiled and flirted with the young ladies, Mr. Pembroke surveyed the room with the calculating eye of a man assessing a business opportunity. Remember your manners, her aunt hissed as Lord Pembroke and his son approached. Mr. Thornfield, Lord Pembroke boomed, delighted to see you again. And Mrs. Thornfield, you look charming as always. Pleasantries were exchanged before Lord Pembroke turned to Catherine. And this must be your niece. Miss Everett, it is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Catherine curtsied. The pleasure is mine, my lord. Allow me to introduce my son, James Pembroke. James bowed stiffly. Miss Everett. Mr. Pembroke, she replied, meeting his gaze directly. A flicker of surprise crossed his features, as though he had expected her to look away demurely. For a moment Catherine thought she glimpsed something else in his eyes, a spark of curiosity perhaps, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I understand you have recently returned from London, Mr. Pembroke, Catherine said, determined to show that she was not intimidated by his reputation. How did you find the city this season? Much as it always is, he replied. Crowded, noisy, and filled with people more concerned with appearances than substance. His blunt assessment startled a genuine laugh from Catherine. How refreshingly honest. Most gentlemen would speak only of the delights of town to impress a country miss. Again, that flicker of interest in his eyes. Do you prefer honeyed words to truth, Miss Everett? On the contrary, she replied. I find truth far more valuable even when it is not what one wishes to hear. The orchestra began to play, signaling the start of the dancing. Would you care to dance, Miss Everett? James asked, the question sounding more like a business proposition than a request. I would, she replied simply. As he led her to the floor, Catherine felt the eyes of the assembly upon them. James Pembroke rarely danced, and never with unknown country girls of modest means. She knew her aunt and uncle would be calculating the advantages of such a connection, already imagining Catherine as mistress of the Pembroke estate. The dance brought them together and apart, the formal patterns keeping their conversation necessarily brief. You dance well, Mr. Pembroke, Catherine observed during one such meeting. As do you, he replied, though you seem distracted. Catherine smiled. Am I so transparent? I was thinking that everyone in this room believes you are evaluating me as a potential bride. His step faltered almost imperceptibly. And what do you think, Miss Everett? I think, she said as they circled each other, that you are as trapped by expectations as I am. The dance separated them before he could respond, and when they came together again, his expression had hardened. You presume to know my mind after a brief acquaintance? Not at all, Catherine replied calmly. I merely observe that we each play the roles assigned to us. You, the wealthy bachelor seeking a suitable wife, I, the dependent niece hoping to secure my future through marriage. The music ended, and James bowed stiffly. You are unusually forthright for a young lady seeking a husband. Perhaps because I am not seeking a husband, Mr. Pembroke, she replied quietly. Merely a future I can bear. He escorted her back to her aunt and uncle, his expression unreadable. Thank you for the dance, Miss Everett. As he walked away, Catherine's aunt clutched her arm. What did you say to him? He looked most displeased. We discussed truth versus flattery, Catherine replied. I fear Mr. Pembroke and I have different views on the subject. Her aunt's face fell. You foolish girl. Do you not understand what such a match would mean for your future, for all of us? Catherine did understand all too well, but as she watched James Pembroke move through the crowd, keeping everyone at a careful distance, she wondered if wealth and security were worth the price of binding herself to a man whose company she could scarcely tolerate. The following morning, Catherine escaped the house early, seeking solitude in the gardens of Northbrook Hall, which were open to assembly guests staying in the area. The air was fresh after yesterday's rain, and the gardens were deserted at such an early hour. She followed a winding path until she came upon a small rose garden enclosed by tall hedges. Taking a seat on a stone bench, she withdrew a small volume of poetry from her pocket, relishing the rare moment of peace. Shakespeare at this hour? You are full of surprises, Miss Everett. Catherine started at the voice, nearly dropping her book. James Pembroke stood at the entrance to the garden, dressed for riding. Mr. Pembroke, she said, rising quickly. I did not expect company. Nor did I, he replied, hesitating before adding, but I do not wish to intrude upon your solitude. Please, remain seated. To her surprise, he joined her on the bench, maintaining a proper distance. You are an early riser, she observed. As are you, he countered, though I suspect for different reasons. I come from a life where early hours meant advantage in business. What drives you from your bed at dawn? Catherine considered prevaricating but remembered their conversation about truth. Privacy, she admitted, it is a rare commodity when one lives on the charity of relatives. He studied her face. Your candor is unusual, Miss Everett. Is it? She asked. Or is it that most young ladies you encounter are too concerned with impressing you to speak honestly? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Perhaps both. He gestured to her book. Which of the bard's works captures your attention this morning? His sonnets, she replied. I find comfort in his observations on love and time. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, he quoted unexpectedly. Catherine looked at him with newfound curiosity. You know Shakespeare's sonnets by memory. Only a few, he admitted. My education was comprehensive, if practical. Literature was considered important for a gentleman, though my father emphasized studies that would serve me in commerce. And did they serve you well? They made me rich, he said simply. Whether that constitutes serving me well depends, I suppose, on how one measures success. Catherine turned to face him fully. And how do you measure it, Mr. Pembroke? He seemed taken aback by the directness of her question. By the growth of my business enterprises, the expansion of my shipping fleet, the respect of my peers. All external measures, she observed. What of personal contentment? A luxury few can afford, he replied, a hint of bitterness in his tone. I disagree, Catherine said. Contentment costs nothing, yet is valued beyond price by those who possess it. James rose abruptly. You speak like one who has never known true hardship, Miss Everett. Catherine remained seated, her gaze steady. You know nothing of my hardships, Mr. Pembroke, just as I know nothing of yours. Yet we both presume to judge the other's perspective. He stared at her for a long moment, then inclined his head slightly. A fair observation. I apologize for my presumption. As do I, she replied. An awkward silence fell between them. I should return before my absence is noted, Catherine said, rising from the bench. May I escort you back to the house, he offered. Thank you, but no, she replied. My aunt would draw conclusions from such an encounter that neither of us wishes to encourage. He raised an eyebrow. Are you so certain of what I wish, Miss Everett? Only that you wish for a wife who understands her duties and performs them without complaint, she said, echoing his words from the carriage without realizing it. I fear I would disappoint you in that regard. Before he could respond, she curtsied and departed, leaving James Pembroke staring after her with an expression of bewilderment. The week at Northbrook Hall proceeded with a whirl of activities designed to throw eligible young ladies and gentlemen together. Despite Catherine's aunt's machinations, she and James Pembroke had no further private conversations, though she often felt his gaze upon her during dinner or evening entertainments. On the final night of their stay, a grand ball was held. Catherine wore her best gown, a cream-colored silk that had belonged to her mother, altered to fit the current fashion as best she could manage. Mr. Pembroke has scarcely spoken to you since the first evening, her aunt lamented as they prepared to descend to the ballroom. You must have offended him grievously. Or perhaps he simply found me unsuitable, Catherine replied, refusing to be baited. Then you must make amends tonight, her aunt insisted. Your uncle has heard that Mr. Pembroke departs for London tomorrow. This may be your last opportunity. Catherine said nothing. But as they entered the ballroom, she could not help searching the crowd for his tall figure. She found him standing with a group of gentlemen, looking as remote and unapproachable as ever. The evening progressed, and Catherine danced with several partners, young men her aunt deemed acceptable but not ideal. As the orchestra prepared for a country dance, Catherine was surprised to find James Pembroke standing before her. Miss Everett, would you do me the honor? He asked formally. With pleasure, Mr. Pembroke, she replied, allowing him to lead her to the floor. They took their places in the set, and as the music began, Catherine noticed a tension in his manner that had not been present during their first dance. You seem troubled this evening, she ventured when the dance brought them together. Do I? He replied. Perhaps I am contemplating matters of business. At a ball. How very dedicated you are to your profession. His lips twitched. Not all thoughts of business are tedious, Miss Everett. Indeed? Then I must have misunderstood the nature of commerce. The dance separated them briefly, and when they came together again his expression had softened. "I depart for London tomorrow." "So I have heard," she replied. "I wish you a safe journey." "Will you not ask when I return?" he inquired, a note of challenge in his voice. Catherine met his gaze steadily. Would it matter to either of us? The directness of her question seemed to catch him off guard. "You are the most perplexing young woman I have ever encountered." "I shall take that as a compliment, sir, though I suspect it was not intended as such." The dance ended, and as they bowed to each other, James asked, "Might I speak with you privately before the evening concludes? There is a matter I wish to discuss." Catherine hesitated, aware of her aunt watching them closely. "The terrace, perhaps? In half an hour?" He nodded. "Until then, Miss Everett." The night air was cool on the terrace, the sounds of the ball muted by the thick walls of Northbrook Hall. Catherine had managed to slip away without her aunt noticing, claiming a need for fresh air after the heat of the ballroom. She waited in the shadows, wondering if James Pembroke would actually appear or if he had reconsidered speaking with her. Just as she was about to return inside, the terrace door opened, and he stepped out. "Miss Everett," he said, approaching her. "Thank you for meeting me." "You said you wished to discuss something, Mr. Pembroke," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. He seemed uncharacteristically uncertain, pacing a few steps before turning to face her. "I find myself in an unusual position," he began. "Since our first meeting I have been disturbed." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "I apologize if my candor offended you." "No," he said quickly. "It is not offense I feel, but rather awakening. You have challenged my preconceptions, Miss Everett, in ways I did not anticipate." She remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I have spent my life building a fortune, believing that security and status were the measures of a man's worth," he said. "Yet in your company, I find myself questioning whether I have overlooked something essential." "And what might that be?" she asked softly. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes. The possibility of a partnership based not merely on social compatibility or financial advantage, but on mutual understanding and respect. Catherine's breath caught. "Mr. Pembroke, are you?" "I am not proposing marriage, Miss Everett," he said hurriedly. "Not yet. That would be presumptuous given our brief acquaintance, but I would like to know you better." "To what end?" she asked, unwilling to allow ambiguity. "To determine whether the connection I sense between us might grow into something more substantial," he replied. "I return to London tomorrow, but I shall be back in the county within a month. With your permission, I would call upon you at Thornfield Manor." Catherine considered his words carefully. "My aunt and uncle would be delighted," she said. "But their approval is not what you seek, is it?" "No," he admitted. "It is yours." "Why?" she pressed. "I have neither fortune nor connections to recommend me. I have been forthright to the point of impertinence. I question your values and assumptions. What possible attraction could such qualities hold for a man in your position?" James took her hand, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Because in a world of calculated deference and practiced charm, your honesty is like drawing breath after being too long underwater." He paused, searching for words. "I have achieved everything I set out to accomplish, Miss Everett, only to discover that success without someone to share it with is hollow." "And you believe I might be that someone?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I believe it is worth discovering," he replied, "if you are willing." Catherine withdrew her hand slowly. "I am not looking to be rescued, Mr. Pembroke. If I agree to your visits, it is not from desperation or calculation." "I would expect nothing less," he said with the hint of a smile. "Your independence of mind is what intrigues me most." She studied his face in the moonlight, trying to discern his true intentions. What she saw there, vulnerability beneath the confident exterior, touched her in a way she had not expected. "Very well," she said at last. "You may call when you return from London." Relief washed over his features. "Thank you, Miss Everett." They stood in silence for a moment, the night air wrapping around them like a cloak. "We should return to the ball," Catherine said finally, "before my absence is remarked upon." He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength beneath his evening coat. "One question before we go in," he said, pausing at the terrace door. "What is it that you seek in life, Catherine? Not what your aunt and uncle wish for you, but what you desire for yourself." The use of her given name should have shocked her, but somehow it seemed right in this moment of honesty. "The freedom to make my own choices," she replied, "and someone who sees me clearly and values what they see." His eyes held hers. "Then we may have more in common than either of us first supposed." 1 month later, Catherine sat in the garden at Thornfield Manor, a book open on her lap, though her thoughts were far from its pages. Her aunt had been in a state of barely contained excitement since receiving word that Mr. Pembroke would call that afternoon. "Catherine," her aunt called from the house, "Mr. Pembroke has arrived. Come at once." Taking a deep breath, Catherine closed her book and walked slowly toward the house. As she entered the drawing room, she saw James standing by the fireplace, looking more at ease than she had ever seen him. "Miss Everett," he said, bowing, "it is a pleasure to see you again." "Mr. Pembroke," she replied with a curtsy, "welcome to Thornfield Manor." Her aunt hovered anxiously nearby until James turned to her with a polite smile. "Mrs. Thornfield, might I impose upon your hospitality to request a walk in the garden with Miss Everett? The weather is exceptionally fine today." Though clearly torn between propriety and the desire to encourage the connection, her aunt nodded. "Of course, but do not stray beyond the garden walls." Once in the garden, James visibly relaxed. "Your aunt watches you like a hawk guards its prey." "She fears I will say something to alienate you," Catherine admitted with a small smile. "She has lectured me daily on the virtues of agreeableness." "And how have you found that advice?" "Impossible to follow," she replied honestly. He laughed. "The sound rich and genuine. I have thought of our conversations often while in London," he said as they walked along a gravel path. "They provided a refreshing contrast to the empty social niceties I encounter in town." "I am glad to have provided entertainment," she said dryly. James stopped walking and turned to face her. "It was far more than entertainment, Catherine. It was illumination." Something in his tone made her look up at him closely. "What do you mean?" "I mean that meeting you has changed me," he said simply. "Made me question the path I have followed so single-mindedly. Made me wonder if there might be another way to live." Catherine felt her carefully maintained composure begin to waver. "And what have you concluded?" "That I want a life with meaning beyond commerce and status," he replied. "That I want a partner, not an ornament or a possession." He took her hand. "That I want someone who challenges me to be better than I am." "James," she began, but he continued. "I know it is soon, too soon by society's standards, but I have never been one to delay once I have made a decision." He drew a deep breath. "Catherine Everett, I find myself in love with you. Your intelligence, your honesty, your courage in the face of circumstances that would crush a lesser spirit. Would you consider becoming my wife?" Catherine stared at him, momentarily speechless. "You cannot mean it," she said at last. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he insisted. "The rest we can discover together." "And if what you discover displeases you," she challenged. "If my forthright nature becomes tiresome rather than refreshing, if you find yourself wishing for a more conventional wife?" "Then I shall have received exactly what I deserve for rushing into marriage," he said with unexpected humor. "But I do not think that will happen. Some things, once seen, cannot be unseen. You have shown me a glimpse of what life could be with someone who meets me as an equal. I cannot go back to seeing marriage as merely a social obligation." Catherine withdrew her hand gently. "I need time, James. This is too important a decision to make in haste." "Of course," he said, though she could see his disappointment. "May I continue to call on you while you consider?" "Yes," she replied. "I would like that." He smiled, and for the first time, Catherine saw the full warmth of it transform his features. "Then I shall be content with that for now." As they resumed their walk, Catherine felt a sense of possibility unfurling within her, the chance to build a life based not on dependency or obligation, but on mutual respect and affection. It was not what she had expected when she first met James Pembroke, but perhaps that was the nature of true connection. It arrived not according to plan or calculation, but in its own time and manner, surprising both parties with its depth and potential. Over the following weeks, James called at Thornfield Manor regularly. With each visit, Catherine discovered new facets of his character, his dry wit, his genuine concern for the welfare of those who worked for him, his thoughtful opinions on everything from literature to politics. On a particularly fine day in June, they walked beyond the garden to a small stream that bordered the Thornfield property. Sitting on a fallen log, Catherine watched the water flow past, reflecting the blue sky above. "Have you had sufficient time to consider my proposal?" James asked quietly. Catherine turned to him with a smile. I have. And, he prompted when she did not continue. And I find that despite my initial reservations, I have developed a deep affection for you, she said. More than affection, love, I believe, though I have little experience with the emotion. Hope brightened his eyes. Does that mean? It means that I accept your proposal, she said, but with one condition. Name it, he replied immediately. That we enter this marriage as equals, she said firmly. I will not be a decorative addition to your household or merely the mother of your heirs. I wish to be your partner in all things, to share your burdens and your joys, to speak freely without fear that my opinions will be dismissed or my independence curtailed. James took her hands in his. I would have it no other way. Indeed, any other arrangement would be a poor substitution for what we might build together. He searched her face. Does this mean I may speak to your uncle? It does, she replied, though I warn you he will accept with indecent haste. James laughed. Then let us delay telling him until tomorrow. Today I wish to savor this moment with you alone. As he leaned forward to kiss her, Catherine closed her eyes, surrendering to the sweet certainty that had grown between them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, two independent spirits who had found in each other not completion, but complementation. And in that kiss, Catherine felt the promise of spring after winter, of light after darkness, of a future she had scarcely dared to imagine, one crafted not by circumstances or expectations, but by choice and connection and the transformative power of being truly seen.